Good evening, everybody. There you go. Yeah, I just put up here our church's statement of purpose we say every Sunday morning, because that usually quiets everybody down. It's good to see you here tonight. We have another excellent program this evening. Before we do anything, though, I'd like for us to give a big round of applause for the founder of our feast and the cook and the chef and chief bottle washer, Rich Wagner. Our presenter tonight is Lark Cowart, who obtained her law degree from Loyola University in Chicago School of Law and a master's degree in dispute resolution from Pepperdine University School of Law. She has been licensed to practice law in the state of Illinois since 2002, and before coming to the Kane County State's Attorney's Office, she worked as a staff attorney in the Circuit Court of Cook County Criminal Division as a law clerk in the Illinois Appellate Court. She also performed small claims mediations in Van Nuys, California, and victim offender mediations for the Centinela Valley, is that right? Juvenile Diversion Project in Hawthorne, California. And since coming to the State's Attorney's Office in 2004, she's worked in many units, including domestic violence, elder abuse, narcotics, juvenile delinquency, and child abuse and neglect. That sounds like a really uplifting kind of thing to do. Yeah, right. Yeah. As well as supervising the mental health unit, which handles involuntary commitments and medication petitions. She supervises the child protection and juvenile delinquency units and handles all of the dual involved youth cases as well. As a member of the State's Attorney's Office, Lark has been actively involved in training and education. In 2006, she created the Citizens Prosecutor Academy, which was an 8-week course available to the public regarding the criminal justice system. She helped draft legislation to create an elder fatality review team. And as the community prosecutor, Lark spoke at community group meetings on topics including elder abuse, financial exploitation, expungements, whatever that is, but I'm interested to know, it sounds interesting, and bullying, which is of course what she's talking about tonight. She's currently involved in an effort to provide anti-bullying training in all the schools in Kane County. And as the grandfather of somebody that just faced that this past week, I want to say that's an important work to be doing. I also could not help but overhear that she has relatives in Georgia, South Carolina, and where else?
Oh, yeah, I'm a Southerner transplant. Kentucky, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Missouri, and Arkansas.
I knew there was something I liked about you, sweetheart. How's your mama and them? So without any further ado, let's welcome Lark Cowart.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here. I will do my very best to stay put because that's where the microphone is, but I'm a lawyer and we are known to roam. So if you can't hear me when I step away, just raise your hand and I'll make sure that I wander back to the microphone.
The microphone does come out. You can.
Oh, okay, even better. Oh, well, there's a cord. I'm kind of clumsy. I'll trip and fall.
I'm sorry.
You got to know yourself, right? And expungements, real quick here, since this is a church group, it is the legal system's way of forgiving somebody. Oh. So what it does is it removes that blight on your record. It's something you can ask for so that it'll get rid of an arrest or a judgment in court. So, all right, but that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. I am talking to you about bullying, rude behavior, and online civility, which never happens, right? So we usually start with, does it happen? Everybody knows it does. It happens in school, it happens in the workplace, and what's been so topical recently is it's happening in so many different areas that we didn't really think about before. It's happening in politics, it's happening in Hollywood, it's happening everywhere, and it's something we really need to be conscious of because the consequences are so high. People take their own lives because of the experiences that they've had. It's not what we were used to as children where somebody took your lunch money. We are way beyond that. And that's why it's so important to be aware and for having community groups like this come together so that you can educate yourself and protect yourself, but also protect the community. So these are just a couple examples. The first one related to Mr. Morrissey. He actually was successful in committing suicide due to the acts that he experienced. Fortunately, the rest of them were not. There was interventions prior to that. But what I want to talk to you about is harassment, real quick. If I say harassment, who feels like they understand what that means? Okay, I thought it would be more. Fair enough. Because I think that this is a word we often use. So when we're talking about harassment, it's somebody who's annoying you. They're bothering you. And they're doing it over and over again, right? They're harassing you. It's creating an unpleasant situation. And it can stress you out. It can make you avoid certain things. So unless that's done in an electronic way, harassment isn't a crime. It's an annoyance. What I want to do is compare that real quick to what is bullying. Unwanted aggressive behaviors from peers. It's repeated or has the potential of being repeated. What's that sound like?
Harassment.
It sounds exactly like harassment, doesn't it?
It does.
The impact is exactly the same. So what's the difference? Because bullying is a really hot button word right now. We hear it all the time. Oh, they were bullied. Sometimes I want to say, no, that was just a crime. The difference is bullying has to have a real or perceived power imbalance. When we're talking about the in-person type of bullying, it can be size. It can be stature. It can be employment. It can be social standing. But there has to be some sort of power imbalance. And it doesn't actually have to objectively be true. It's just that the people involved in it feel that way. All right? So what's not bullying? You have to have that pattern. So if it's an isolated event, we're talking about rude behavior. We're talking about people who are not very nice. We are talking about people who probably need to get in here a little bit more often. But it's not bullying. It can be harassment, depending. All right. So, real quick, who has children? Who has grandchildren? Who knows children? Who's been a child? Right. Does bullying happen to kids?
Yes.
Absolutely. So what's really interesting to me, do I have, nope, it's not working. We're talking essentially between these two statistics, it's about 25%. About 25% of children experience being bullied. About 1 in 5 admit that they are doing it or have done it. So my next question to you is, what happens when you graduate high school or college and you're not a student anymore? What do you think happens to that 25% of people who've been bullied, or that 1 in 5 who admits to being a bully?
It continues.
It continues. This behavior doesn't end just because you're not in school. What's really interesting to me about these statistics, right around that 25% mark. The numbers stay the same when you're out of school. About 25% of the population is still experiencing being bullied out of that school environment now. 72% of people are aware that this is happening. 20% people have seen it. And that's where the community is so important, because when you see it, you need to do something about it. That's the only way we're going to change this. And as we know right now from what's been in the news, gender plays a role. When we're talking about adults in the community, 69% of the people who are perpetrators are male. That goes back to that real or perceived power imbalance. One of the types of power imbalance in our society, the way it's been set up, is gender. So approximately 60% of the targets are women. That doesn't mean that all of them feel bullied, or that that's what their experience is, but that's 60% are the target of that. What's really interesting also, who gets fired? Yeah. Yeah. So this is why people who are experiencing this are so reluctant to come forward. And this is across the board. We hear that with victims of sexual assault. They don't want to come forward because they're going to be victimized. I see that, or saw that. I've left the state's attorney's office about a month ago, so I'm still not used to saying the past tense. I saw that when I supervised the juvenile delinquency unit. It was not uncommon for us to have somebody come in with a charge against them because they finally fought back. So the person who's getting in trouble is the one who's been picked on repeatedly. So we need to find a better way to deal with it so that we are not having the victims pay the price. This we also know. 72% in the workplace, it's the boss. That real or perceived power imbalance. All right, so what is bullying? These are the three types. You have verbal, you have social or relational, and you have physical. There's also cyberbullying. All of that type of behavior, when people can't get you in a physical way, face-to-face, goes online, and it just gets nastier. The other thing I want to talk about is the unwanted sexual conduct. That can fit into verbal, that can fit into physical, that can fit into social. It's not its own separate thing in terms of the bullying world, because the behaviors that are sexual can be in any one of those first three. So that's just the way that the law kind of breaks it down. So verbal, we all know what this is. You get yelled at, you get teased. Somebody gets right up in your face, raises their voice. Verbal. They're threatening you, threatening to cause harm. I'm going to beat your blankety blank. Verbal bullying. Social. I am so happy to see that we don't have any of that here tonight. What you should look for at your community events is the person who's sitting off on their own. And in church groups, it's really wonderful because most people make a real point to go over and sit with them and include them. But do you do that same thing in your work environment? Do you do that same thing in other community organizations you're a part of? When you see that person separate, that's a sign that they may be experiencing this. Physical. We all know what this is. You're getting hit, you're getting bumped. You're getting pressured to move aside, make way for somebody. Abuse. I saw it. Theft. That also can fit under this as well. Oh, actually, this one down at the bottom is really common. And we see that also a lot in domestic situations. Because not only are you taking it from them, you are exerting your authority by breaking it and destroying it. It adds just another layer of power. So the sexual conduct we're talking about, it can be words, it can be touching, the request for sexual favors, that certainly can fall under the verbal as well. Do you all know what sexting is? Okay. So for those of you who don't, I don't want to make anybody raise their hand if they don't. It's when you are taking a sexual type picture, image, video of any kind, and you are sending it through electronic means to somebody else. We now call that sexting. It happens all the time. The younger you are, generally, the more it's happening. And really, you should avoid that.
There's just a big case of this in Crystal Lake.
Yeah.
That they broke this weekend.
Yeah.
What happened? There's a big case of this in Crystal Lake.
Yeah.
I didn't see your picture, it's okay.
I'm glad that
Like,
picture didn't make it.
"No, thank you." All right, so we talked about the things that can happen in person. The next thing I want to talk about is how it transfers to online or digital means. So that's what your cyberbullying is. It's when you're embarrassed, you're harassed, you're threatened. Somebody impersonates you, says things that you wouldn't, does things that you wouldn't, but they attributed it to your online identity. Yeah, these are all examples of the cyberbullying, and in fact, the impersonation is a huge one, especially with some of our younger citizens. And it happens a lot. Cyberbullying happens way more than any sort of in-person bullying experience at this point, because it's easy. I don't have to go find you physically. Once I have found who you are online, all I have to do is log on. All I have to do is pick up my phone. All I have to do is send a text, a tweet, and I can do that. And that's what's scary about it. You know, if you were bullied in school, home was a safe place. You could leave, and you had a chance to just take a breath, regroup, get ready for it again. But with the cyberbullying, there is no safe place. They can get you anywhere, at any time. The audience is often much larger. For instance, you with the lovely shirt, if we had an issue at school, the lunchroom might see, or at work. Our coworkers might know. But now I take that home and I send out an Instagram message, and my 500 best friends on Instagram know about it, and then they forward it on to their 500 best friends, and the next thing you know, you have like 50,000 people that know about whatever it is that happened. The audience is huge in comparison. It's also hard for us to do something about it. It's harder to protect yourself because you can't just walk away. You can't just, bring your friends with you and create a safe space around you. You have to take more affirmative steps to protect your online identity and to protect yourself from people being able to contact you against your wishes. So what should you keep an eye out for? Are you or somebody you know avoiding things that you used to like to do? How many people take a class just for fun? Yeah, right? So, we talk about school and everybody's thinking, high school, middle school, grade school, but there's a lot of adult learners that continue to take classes. This still happens. Have you stopped doing something that you enjoyed because there was that person in your class? That person at your workplace? Are you or somebody you know start crying when there's really not a particular reason to? You're noticing that you're getting depressed or you're just angry all the time? That could be menopause. As my mother said, I have that to look forward to. But it could also be a sign that you are having a situation in your life that is making you feel disempowered. And that's really what bullying is about. It is disempowering the person it's happening to. Is somebody picked on in the presence of others? Who's seen this? Where a person says something mean and they're like, oh, can't you take a joke? Right. That is bullying. That is a sign to look out for. That is the catchphrase that people who like to do that use, because it excuses them and it puts the ownership on the person who is being subjected to it, because it's your problem that you can't take that joke, not their problem because they are being inappropriate. So when you hear that, you need to stand up. This is really serious. If people are getting hurt, there's a big problem. I mean, that's a sign potentially of domestic abuse. I used to prosecute that, and I always say, just like bullying doesn't stop when you turn 18, domestic violence doesn't stop just because you're over 60. We call it elder abuse. I know that you are not actually old when you are 60, but that's what the law says. You have become an elder. So if you see anybody that you notice always seems to have been to the doctor, that they are bruised, Do they fall down a lot? And there's not really a reason for it. There's a sign there that needs some investigating. Are you missing things? Is this their third missing phone and they don't have Alzheimer's? Like their third missing phone and they are completely mentally capable. Somebody might be taking that. So what are some of the consequences? We've talked about them already. You might quit your job because it's not worth that emotional strain. You might stop doing things that you enjoyed. You might develop an ulcer. You might have physical side effects from this, as well as emotional ones. Your safety might be at risk. This is what can happen to you if you're suffering this. This is what can happen to your friends and your colleagues. So what should you be looking for? In a lot of ways, it's the same thing you looked for in school. You have somebody who talks a big game. You know, they're the big man, big woman on campus, and they want you to know about that. So they're talking about how they are, have achieved everything. They're the best at everything, and especially if it's physical. If they're talking about, I really beat that person down, even if they're meaning verbally, that's a sign. The person who all of a sudden has lots of items that they didn't used to have, they have a couple different iPhones, right? They got the brand new iPad, and you're like, those are pricey. Where is that all coming from, especially when they have multiples of those? When they become aggressive verbally if they feel challenged. If you disagree with somebody and their response is to say, of course you do, you stupid blankety blank, that's somebody who's likely to be a bully. They have a strong need to dominate others across the board. What can happen to them? There can be disciplinary issues, school, work. Most employers have human resources guidelines for workplace behavior, and there can be consequences as a result of that. Once again, it all requires somebody actually coming forward and talking about it first. Once you get that reputation, the community is small. I'm always surprised how often I run into people that I've had connections with in the strangest places. So if you get that reputation of being a bully, somebody that can't be worked with or intimidates others, you're going to have some trouble with career advancement. You can also have some isolation of your own. People don't want to be around you. The worst case scenario for them, they can lose their job. Worst case scenario as far as I'm concerned, they can end up in jail, depending on what they've done. Because there isn't a crime specifically called bullying. If you went to the criminal code and tried to look that up, it doesn't exist. But there are crimes that match that behavior. So disorderly conduct is when somebody's getting in your face and they are screaming and you are scared. And not only you, but the table around you. That's a disorderly conduct. It's alarming and disturbing. That's the statute words. And promotes a breach of the peace. Because it was written a really long time ago. But that just means it's alarming and disturbing to a lot of other people too. Assault. What that means in Illinois is you think you're about to get hit. This is what bullies do. They get up real close, stand big and tall, they get in your face, and you are actually often physically afraid. That's assault. Battery. They made contact with you. And I love this one because you do not have to have a bruise. You don't have to have a red mark. They just had to touch you in any way that you find, we call it insulting and provoking. So if somebody's up in your face and they give you a little shove, you're perfectly fine, but that bothered you. It's a crime. It's not okay. Harassment. If they do it in person, unless it's one of the crimes, it's okay. But if you do it by phone, it's a crime. If you do it on your cell phone with other electronic means, it's a crime. So that's one of those ways that we do try and protect people more from the cyberbullying types of behaviors than perhaps we would in person. There's also cyber stalking, when somebody is following you around to all of your different social media accounts, and they are targeting you on each one of those, and they are saying bad things about you on each one of those, and threats. That falls under your cyber stalking. The criminal damage to property is another one. We get this a lot. Once again, more so with kids. The taking things and breaking it. That's not just bullying, it's a crime. Stealing, it's a crime. So some of that behavior that we were talking about earlier with the sexual conduct, that is absolutely criminal. And it's one of my little pet peeves when people say, oh, you know, they were being bullied. No, they were sexually abused. Sexual abuse is when somebody is touching you in a way that is sexually pleasing to them at your expense. So they're touching your breasts, they're touching your butt, they're touching other parts. You don't want it, and they are doing it for power, for control, and for sexual gratification. That is a crime. The difference in Illinois between abuse and assault is penetration. I put this one up here also because, as we said, a lot of you have children or grandchildren or no children. It happens online a lot. Kids can get bullied into this. They can get seduced into this. It's something to be aware of, and it is a crime here in Illinois. This one at the top, that goes back to the sexting. So if I make the very poor choice to take indelicate pictures of myself, and then I send them to this gentleman here, right? And right, you're like, oh, please don't, no. And you're like, hey, cool. And you send it on to a bunch of your friends, because I am over the age of 18. What he has done is disseminated these private sexual images without my consent. If I happen to be under 18, it turns into child pornography. And you have now disseminated child pornography, and you are required to go to jail for at least 6 years. Here, it's a Class A misdemeanor. You're going to have a fine and probably some supervision. So make sure people are over 18 if there is ever a sexual image. All right. So what can you do to protect yourself? Stay with friends. Don't be alone near the person that you are feeling afraid of. That's the #1 thing that you can do to protect yourself. Obviously, we want you to report it, but we know that that can be a challenge. Stay in public places, be aware of your surroundings. So for the women out there, how many people do this already? Yeah. So when I moved to California when I was in high school, and alone. And that was the thing, my mom sat down with me and said, you need to be aware. Always aware of your surroundings, aware of who's following you. So that's something that women are often taught from a very young age, but men are not. And men get bullied too. And this is an important way to protect yourself no matter what your gender is. And you have to use your voice. You have to speak up. Not just for other people, but for yourself too. It's a hard thing to do, but the people around might not know what's going on, but especially in a community like this, if you say, stop that, back away, I don't like that, change your tone of voice, lower your voice, people are going to hear that, and it's going to make them aware. And sometimes, bullies aren't necessarily malicious, not purposefully so. It can be an ingrained behavior that they have done their entire lives. And until people start calling them on that, they aren't even really aware of the impact that that can have. So one of the things you can do to protect yourself from cyberbullying is first you got to know what are these platforms? How are people getting to you? And then what can the police do about it? right? So these are many of our most common ones right now. So there's YouTube, Tinder, email, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, Instagram, Snapchat, Musical.ly. People heard of that one? Okay, so this one is really pretty cool because it lets kids, where's my musician? It lets kids create music and then post it for public dissemination. But one of our worst bullying cases recently came in right through that. People were just saying horrible things because you can comment on anything you want attached to that video. And this one's WhatsApp, which is just a texting app. Where does it happen? The most common, this is a little bit outdated in terms of the chat room instant message. It'd be Snapchat and Instagram. Those are the most common right now. Emails has, dropped down because like unless you're over the age of about 30, nobody emails anymore. Yep, yeah. And when people do, it's usually for work purposes, and people are a little more conscious of what they're saying. So that one has definitely dropped. So this is one of the things I said to watch out for. We had an interesting case in St. Charles where this girl was really getting picked on at school. And the reason she was getting picked on at school was because somebody had created a fake account that looked like her, and they were saying terrible things about another person. So, for instance, I'm sorry, I just don't like you. Okay. And so I can't do anything to you because I'm going to get in trouble. So I'm going to pretend that I'm you, and then I'm going to say terrible things about this lovely lady in the front here, who everybody loves. And they're going to get so mad at you because of that, that you are now ostracized. That's exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. And the way it happened is because you thought I was your friend. And so I was over at your house, and I hopped on your computer because you said, yeah, no problem. And I created an account on your computer from me that I can now access from anywhere, but it looks like your IP address. Really important, keep that computer in a public place. Be careful who's on it. If it's a stranger, even a friend, don't walk too far away. Blogging, anybody blog? Oh, okay. So there are some people out there who are really nasty on their blogs. They enjoy making public comment, editorializing about others, and just really enjoy being nasty. So there are blogs, complete blogs out there that are mean. You can also create fake pictures. There's all sorts of Photoshop apps that can make it look like anything. I skydive, but only in a picture, you know. Except instead of innocent like that, it's me doing something inappropriate sexually, perhaps. And that's how people get blackmailed. And most of our suicide cases that we've had nationwide are actually when people have started getting blackmailed. So what can you do? Do not respond. It is hard, especially if you are one of those kind people that when you first see it, you think, oh, there just must be a misunderstanding. If they just knew that I really wasn't like how they think I am, we could be friends, or at least not enemies. Don't respond. Anything that you do, anything that you say, is going to make that situation worse. Most people, in that sense, they start out with something that is relatively mild, and the more you respond, the worse it gets. Make sure you keep a record. Who knows what an ISP is? Okay, yep. So you can report to your internet service provider what's going on. Everybody knows Google, right? Okay. You can Google how to do that. There is a step-by-step process that they can walk you through. And although I'm young enough to know how to do it myself, I would still probably be asking my, if I had grandkids, but my kids' friends tell me through this. So if you don't want to figure it out yourself, I am sure that there's somebody in your community that will be very happy to show you how to do that. And depending on what's said, report it to the police. The police are really good at what they call digital threat analysis. So there have been, so many school shootings, right? We've had 11 so far nationwide in January alone. It's terrible. One of the side effects of that is that the police have gotten very good at digital threat analysis. So if you have something that comes through to you that you feel is threatening and you send it on to the police, they can embed it in, especially images, they can find GPS coordinates, so they can find out where this person is. How close are they to you? How real is this threat to you personally? They can find out, is this a new image or is this a stock image? There's just a lot of information they can get. So I do encourage you to report to the police. Delete your account. So my email, my name is Lark Cowart. My email is Cowart Lark. It's very original. If you are being plagued by somebody who is bullying you, delete that account and make up, I don't know, Big Bird 522. Something that has nothing to do with your name. They're going to have a lot harder time finding you. Once you have done that, you need to make sure that you are super selective of who you allow back in. Because if you have changed your online name to Big Bird and you let in everybody that you had before, that person's coming back in. Or they're going to find it through a friend of a friend. So immediate family probably only, very close personal friends. The website example that I was talking about, you got to call ISP and your police department if ever something like that happens. If you know somebody, if you know that the person is somebody you know through an organization, we talk about school and jobs, but any organization, let the organization know. Because everyone nowadays has a protocol for dealing with us. So there's a beautiful thing about the internet. And the flip side is it's terrible because nothing ever goes away. So if you have posted something, it will be there forever. Forever. There are even websites that take essentially a snapshot of what was online that day. And it's an archive. So you can go back through the archives. It is going to be there forever. The plus side of that is it's there forever, so we can get that evidence. So we can find Mike. His iPhone has that ISP address. The police can track that down. Just because it's deleted doesn't mean it went away. The problem is sometimes we have to get subpoenas, and it can take a while to get that through the police and through the state's attorney's office, and then get it to your provider. Say I'm trying to subpoena information from Instagram. They only keep it so long. So while it's going to be online forever, and we know who did it, the proof that I would need in court is going to go away. So the sooner you're reported to law enforcement, the sooner we can get that subpoena, the sooner we can get the evidence that will let me win at trial. Most of that is gone after 30 days, so report soon. Ways that you can help police in addition to reporting: print it off, take a screenshot. If you don't know how to take a screenshot, I know that there are people in this room who do. It changes depending on your phone. I actually don't know how to on my current phone because it's different than my old one. Make sure you're also keeping a log of the time and the date of what's happening. We talked about what the IP address was before. It's those numbers. Google it because you're not going to remember what I say tonight. And it really will have step-by-step instructions on how to get the IP address. But that is key in helping law enforcement help you stop what's going on. So, as I said, type in Google. It tells you how to do it. Make sure you're thinking before you're taking any sort of pictures. That is the #1 thing that you can do. And if you are concerned, if you have identified in the presentation some of these things, you're like, hey, maybe I do that. Think before you say, think before you post. There's an app out there you can put on your phone that will actually stop a text and say, this might be hurtful. Do you want to send it anyway? Because people in the heat of the moment will say things that they would never say if they've really thought it through. I have done that personally. I'm sure everybody's lost their temper at some point. But once you lose your temper in an online or social media medium, you can't take it back. Like if I yell at you, I can come back the next day and say, I am sorry, I lost my temper. If I tweet whatever it was I was going to yell at you, I can't take that back. So think first, take a breath, calm down. Make sure you're using your privacy settings. Nobody other than your friends should be able to access any of your social media accounts. And you should know personally everybody in that list. I don't know about you, but I get requests all the time from somebody who saw that we have 5 friends in common, and so of course that means that we must be friends too. I don't know them. You can ask your friends in common and say, hey, I'd like to meet so-and-so, and then add them. Be careful about adding somebody you do not personally know. You can always block a number. You can always block somebody from being able to text you. Facebook's the same thing. You can block people. All of the social media platforms have an ability to block somebody. Who's Googled themselves? Yeah. If you haven't, go do that. It's really interesting. But that also gives you an idea of what's out there. You should probably do it maybe every year, just to make sure that things haven't changed that are unexpected to you. Don't ever share your password. How many people are married? Yeah. Don't share your password with your spouse either. Yeah. When I say never share your password, I really actually mean never share your password. Yeah, you're like, why?
You'll get divorced.
The question I have on that is the way things are now. My concern is when I kick the bucket.
Yeah.
I want my children to be able to close my Facebook account, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I have my passwords in a file for them.
That is a fantastic thing to do. So that's a whole separate thing because you do have an online identity. And I think it's in 2 years, the number of dead people on Facebook exceeds the number of living people. So you want people to be able to close out accounts. But you only want them to be able to have that access after you, I think you said kick the bucket? Yeah. So, right. So that's a perfect thing for like a safe deposit box, to have a list of all your accounts and all your passwords. You don't want to have it just in a file cabinet where anybody can get to it, especially if they know where it is. My next door neighbor is an elderly disabled woman. Her grandchildren are addicts. They have full access to her home. I don't know if she does or not, but if she keeps all of that information in a file folder so that it's easy when she passes on, it's easy for them to get it now. And the reason I say don't share with your spouse, life changes. You don't ever want it to, but it does sometimes. And you never know when that's happening, so you need to also protect yourself. Yes?
Also, your Facebook called a legacy contact that you can set up so that if you pass away, then they have your authorized access to that.
That's a great thing to do. And it's never too early. Unfortunately, I'm part of a juggling club, and we had a young man who passed away. He was 23, and he never set anything up like that because at 23 you're not expecting that. It is often an option when you create an account to do the legacy so that at the moment you're creating it, you are setting it up so somebody can do something with it if there should be a need. All right. So what we finish on is just some advice. Confront them if you can, if it's safe, if it's appropriate. If it's not, obviously do not. Make sure you're telling whoever the appropriate authority is, whether it's a minister or pastor, if that's the environment, teacher, authorities. Make sure you're printing out your list, reporting it to your service provider, blocking the person. That often can solve everything. Document what's happening, and if you feel that it is that serious of an immediate threat, make sure you're calling 911. If you're seeing it, help them get out of the situation. Don't just stand by and watch. And you don't even actually have to be that assertive and confrontational when you help. If you're noticing something's going on, you just walk up and you say, oh, that's a beautiful necklace. Hey, where did you get that? Why don't you come on over here with me? You can extract somebody without being confrontational about it. Help them get away. Make sure people understand that there's support for them. Oh, and this last one, sorry. This is really important, like what I was talking about earlier. They need to know this is not okay. I truly feel that if people had said all along, this behavior is not okay, we would not have so many instances in the news right now of people in very powerful positions thinking that this was okay for the last 20 years. They have to know the first time that they've stepped over that line. As a parent, empathy. Bullies don't have empathy. You need to teach your children empathy. You need to have it yourself. You need to show that to your friends and your community. That's what church is about. I know everyone here has that. And I know that in your interactions with others, you are showing that. That's the best thing you can do. Be a model. When you're talking about cyberbullying, make sure that computer is in a shared space. That's like next to impossible now because everybody has laptops and iPads and gaming systems. But what you do need to do is make sure that you're checking in every so often to see what's going on those. You have to make sure that your kids understand what are the dangers out there. Who knows about the multiplayer games? Okay. So, my husband is a gamer, and he would like my 3-year-old son to be a gamer. And so, no, don't, not yet, someday. But, you know, he's playing Mario Kart. Once you start getting into the more advanced games, they find friends online. And they can be anywhere in the world. Your kids need to know that they don't know those people. The gaming systems are actually a great place. I use that word probably not correctly. Predators are there. That is an easy access point to children. They need to be aware of that. You need to know what the school's protocol is, what your employment's protocol, know what your rights are in the environments you're in. And as a community, we educate. That's why you're here tonight. We intervene. And you need to take action. That's what that last one is. There needs to be a community support that says this behavior is not okay in our community. Whether that community is this church, whether that community is Elgin, whether that community is Illinois, or the United States. It can be as small or as broad, but you need to have a voice that says, in our community, this is not okay. So I really thank you for your time. I don't know if anybody has any questions, thoughts, things they want to share.
Is there a way of getting your handle?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be happy to forward it on to Sherry. Yep. Yeah. I have no proprietary interest. Feel free to post it online and say it was terrible.
We'll also post the video of this tonight on our website. All the other ones are there.
Yeah.
I would think this Me Too movement it opens up making your voice heard.
Yes.
But if you see something like that, I mean, how do you actually make your voice heard? I mean, you could be preaching to the wall or something like that, nothing would happen. But if you do see something, how do you help yourself, or how do you make it known?
In the moment or after?
Well, I would probably think after. I mean, in the moment you can confront somebody and, express your pleasure, but after that you'd like to have something accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely. In the moment, if it is safe, always assess that first, because it isn't always. If it is safe, step in and make sure that whoever is the target understands they're supported, and whoever is doing it understands you are not okay with this behavior. Whether it's a comment, whether it's an off-color joke, that's probably the most common we see. Not okay. And afterwards, if it's something that happened on the street that you just overheard, there's really not that much you're going to be able to do. But if it is in some sort of community or group setting, that's why we say go talk to the authority figure of whatever that is, and then you do an education session. Or in restorative practices, you might have a circle about it. You would sit down and actually talk about it. How it impacted you as somebody who observed it, how it impacted the person who experienced it. What was that person thinking at the time? What was their purpose? In our organizations, we need to create the norms of expected behavior. So it might be something very simple as you might have to lay that out for whatever group that is. Hey, you know what? We've been together for a while, but we've never really talked about what are our expectations when we interact with each other? So we're going to sit down and take a minute and do that. That's one of the best things that you can do. Anything else? Yeah.
Document everything.
Yes.
Everything. We did that and we went to the police. They will listen.
Yeah.
The police, so I've got it, everything in order. Screenshots, printer, everything.
The police take this very, very seriously, and so does the state's attorney's office. I don't speak for them anymore. That was my experience when I was there. Because as I said, what happens is somebody is repeatedly subjected to this until they get to the point where they've had too much. And then it can be something as simple as they punch somebody and fought back, or it can be something as extreme as they come to school with an automatic rifle and take out half of their class. And the police are incredibly aware of the risk of that, so they take this so seriously.
What about the schools?
The schools are terrified. They absolutely are. The way things have gone in our communities is tragic. And they're terrified of the safety of their students. They're terrified of a lawsuit. It is difficult to be a teacher. It's difficult to be an administrator. They all have protocols for managing this. And actually, as of August of 2017, the state legislature actually passed in the school code definitions for bullying and for cyberbullying and laid out what the expected protocol for the school would be. It is sad that it took us until August of 2017 to do this. There was not a definition anywhere of cyberbullying or bullying other than, Webster's dictionary. But they are taking it seriously. The schools are as well.
If you work in a school, you're mandated to report any kind of abuse.
Yeah.
Whether it's cyberbullying, domestic abuse, you are required as your mandated person to report it. And some people don't want to report it because they'll be labeled as a troublemaker.
So are you talking about mandated reporting?
Right.
Okay, so mandated reporting is you are required to report to DCFS any concern for abuse, neglect, or dependency. You are not required to report to DCFS when peers are having inappropriate interactions. So you have to report if there is a person in authority, a parent, a guardian, a teacher, abuse, neglect, or dependency of a child. So it does not necessarily trigger what you're talking about in terms of the peer interaction, but you should. And just like I always say that whether you're mandated or not, you should report if you have concerns about abuse, neglect, or dependency.
A lot of this stuff starts at home. The child may be getting abused at home, so that's all they've known. And they come to school because they've been bullied at home, so they figure that's just the way life is. And they bully people at school.
Sure. That's why I say the number one thing you can do as a parent or a grandparent is model empathy. Children learn what you do. Children see what you do. And that's what they know, and that's how they act. And what they have been taught at a young age is how they will be forever. My husband's father was a yeller. He was a borderline alcoholic, and he yelled all the time. We have a 3-year-old son and a 10-month-old daughter. And he fights very hard for this not to be his default reaction. But when he gets frustrated, that's what he goes to because that's what he knows. And that's what he knew for many, many years as a child. So here he is as a 37-year-old adult, and he moved out of his father's home at 5. And that is still his reaction, that he has to fight every day. That's why the empathy at such a young age is so critically important. Yeah.
The one figure at the beginning was like 82% versus 18%
Yeah.
of those who are bullied lose their job compared to the perpetrators. What do you attribute that to? Or do you have any thoughts on that? Or
It was hard to tell from the way the statistics were kept whether that was they left or were fired. And I would guess that it means that they left their job.
But you also mentioned that 72% of the workplace bullies are the bosses.
Yes.
So I figured obviously they have the control to fire them too, especially
Absolutely.
employment at will.
Yep. Yeah.
I've seen that in my work experience where the bullies are bosses
Yep.
and they're protected because they're usually very powerful and they're generating great income. And even people that have raised their voice about that bully, they'll get a professional coach or whatever, but usually the other person, the lower person loses their job or they're pushed out.
Yeah, the pushed out is a huge one because they might not actually fire you, especially in sort of today's climate, but it will be uncomfortable and you are probably not going to want to stay. They are going to force you out. Yep. And that, think about it, in the business sector especially, the attributes that we have typically valued of management are some of the same behaviors that bullies exhibit. So if you are dominating and domineering, then you are, an assertive go-getter who doesn't back down from a negotiation. So a lot of those behaviors raise you up. There is a very recent shift in the business world that, hey, that's not good. That does not create the atmosphere we want within our organization. And so there is a much higher value now on what they're calling like the soft social skills, the ability to actually have a communication, a conversation with somebody without somebody crying or running away. But that is not what we have valued for a very, very long time. Anything else? Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Given us an awful lot to think about. I know for myself, I want to take 5 minutes of your time after we're over and talk about an incident that happened with my granddaughter on Friday. Since I'm the senior pastor, I get executive privilege. We will take next Sunday night off, but then the following Sunday night, the 11th, somebody that's got the brochure in front of them, I can't remember the guy's name.
Irfan.
Irfan. Kareem.
Kareem Irfan.
Yeah, and say the name of the topic.
Yeah. It is forging unified action from Americans, diversity of faith.
Okay, so it'd be about interfaith dialogue and that sort of thing.
With the Muslims.
And I think your latest group had met with him, and that's how we know him.
Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I heard great reports about that. So cheer on whoever you want to in the Super Bowl next week, and then be back here 2 weeks from tonight. Thank you so much.